Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be bringing you all my first ever prediction for the 2026 United States House of Representatives elections. We are less than 18 months out from the midterms, and it's going to be pretty exciting to see, if Democrats can take back control of the House, if they can take back control of the Senate, and maintain their hold on a number of governorships. We're going to really see I think a generational shift in the Democratic Party, or at least we see some of that. But that is a discussion for another video. I find these midterms always very interesting. Of course, my first ever election cycle was the 2022 midterms, which I don't mean to brag, but I had a pretty good track record, pretty good accuracy record, and I would say, in terms of the House races in general, in terms of the number of races that I got wrong, I think I got like 16 wrong, and I got 10 wrong, but I got 10 wrong in 2024, even though I was wrong about Democrats winning the House majority last year. So, kind of a mixed bag in 24 in terms of whether or not you think I did better or worse than my first one. But I guess, my point is I feel pretty confident about my predictions here. I think that, obviously I do not believe that what I post today, or even in my final prediction, is going to be 100% correct because, I'm not, clairvoyant. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But I do the best, I try to guess these to the best of my ability, and I think that I do a pretty good job. So first off, we're going to go, well, actually, before we start, just to kind of refresh our heads, Democrats right now are in a slim minority. They picked up one seat. I mean, I know it says 2 seats here, but they had won a special election in George Santos's district, or former district, with Tom Suozzi in early 2024. So they gained, they had a net gain of 1 seat in the House, but this was still underwhelming. They were expected to win it along with the presidency, and they were leading in the generic ballot. And if you look at what Real Clear Politics says right now, we unfortunately don't have 538 to use at the same time, but that's okay. Rest in peace, 538. Nate Silver has gone on to do bigger and better things, apparently. Democrats, they're holding a pretty similarly slim lead compared to their 2024 numbers. It is better. It was a lot more back and forth, I would say, in 2024 going into the election. And so right now they were at about a 4-point advantage, which isn't bad, but if you look back to their last Trump midterm, his first midterm in 2018, you look at Democrats, ultimately they won the generic ballot, the House popular vote, by 8 points. It's a pretty hefty margin. Why can I not see? It's not letting me pull this up. I'm not liking that. So if you go back to August, if you go back to this point in, the 2018 cycle, Democrats were up by 9 points. So they were about 5 points behind their 2018 numbers at this point, and that is not a good thing because Republicans are looking to redistrict in red states like Indiana, Texas. I'm sure you've heard a lot about. We're going to talk about Texas in this video, but Democrats, Governor Gavin Newsom is putting a ballot measure, or instructing the state legislature to vote to put a ballot, a measure on the ballot in November, where voters will get to decide whether or not they want new maps for the rest of the decade. There's a good chance that does not pass, but if it does, and I think right now, in terms of, it depends on how, the language is worded. There's a lot of mixed data on it, but it does look like Democrats are going to pass it, and it would give them 5 net gains, roughly, in a perfect world. But yeah, let's get started. I'm not going to go east to west this time. A lot of predictions, I think I started up here in east, in Maine. I'm going to end in Maine, so we're going to start in Alaska. This really depends on Mary Peltola's decision. I think she did really well in 2024, all things considered. I mean, I was still wrong about this race. This was one of the 10 I got wrong. But she did overperform Kamala Harris by about 11 points, I want to say. I don't have it locked in my head. Yeah, it's 11 points because Trump won it by 13. But Nick Begich, I think Peltola, she's being courted by Chuck Schumer to run against Dan Sullivan for Senate, or she's thinking about running for the open governorship in Anchorage, I believe. I actually don't remember what the capital of Alaska is, but I digress. I do think Peltola is ultimately going to run for governor, but I'm keeping this race, ranked choice voting does still exist in this state. I think another strong Democrat could step up, but I don't think anyone, aside from Peltola, could probably beat Nick Begich, whose family has a lot of political capital in the state. It is a big political dynasty with members on both sides of the aisle. So we're going to go up to Washington here. I'm going to give Marie Gluesom Perez a very narrow victory. I do believe she's running against the former minority leader of this Washington Senate, or maybe it's the current minority leader. But anyway, Joe Kent, the Republican who she has faced off in her last two and her previous two election cycles, is not running. I do believe that he was. I don't remember what he was nominated for, but he got a Trump nomination. In a similar case in Oregon, Lori Chavez de Romero, who lost re-election last year, became Secretary of Labor, and that's going to be a likely D seat because Janelle Bynum's not necessarily. Janelle Bynum doesn't seem to be facing much opposition, but we'll also have to see how Tina Kotek does here in the governor's election, because that did definitely weaken Democrats in 2022 because that was such a close race. But getting back to Washington's third, this is a Trump seat, but it's a very narrow Trump seat. It's actually one of the few districts in the country where Kamala Harris did better than Joe Biden in 2024 compared to 2020. So it was very marginal. It still went to Trump, but it's a very suburban, white suburban, traditionally Republican district. So I think depends. I think Gluesom Perez is a very strong incumbent. She's very much is bipartisan. She definitely appeals to this district. I think in a Democratic leaning year, which I'm assuming 2026 is going to be, as the default environment, I do believe that she will hold on, but it will be very close. Going to California, we have a lot here. So the redistricting, the new maps got released, I believe, yesterday. I looked over them. There's still not exact numbers as far as I'm aware of the complete margin, the district margins in 2024, but we have a lot of partisan lean data, and so there are a lot of likely Democratic seats that we're going to be going through here. Even Josh Harder, who's in a Trump +2 district, I think right now, is going to be in a Harris district. Adam Gray, I'm also going to give an advantage to because he was in a Trump +5 district. He won it against an incumbent Republican, and he also, what was it? I think that the district's now Harris, a very narrow Harris district. These two seats up here in California, Kevin Kiley is getting drawn out. So these districts, this is not the current boundary. Well, these are the current boundaries, but these are not what they would look like under 2026. I'm assuming that the ballot measure is approved by California voters in November. And then Doug LaMalfa up here in the safe red district, Democrats ended up cutting up Jared Huffman's district, so it is a little bit less solid blue, but it is still a very blue district. But now they have a very solid first district, where I believe the president of the state senate is looking to run. I think that there's a lot happening in SoCal. So Dave Min and Michael Evans' seats are getting bluer. I think that they are both roughly Harris plus, they're high single digit, low double digit Harris districts. And then Young Kim's seat, she's been the Republican that's been spared in all of this in terms of, SoCal. They've drawn out Ken Calvert's district. And so they've made it a double digit, a D+10 district in terms of partisan lean. They drew out Darrell Isa's district, although this one's a little bit more competitive. This is a lean Democratic seat. This one could go to Isa since he does tend to overperform. A lot of California Republicans down ballot tend to overperform in House races. A lot of down ballot Republicans in California tend to do better than the top of the ticket. Derek Tran's seat, this was a very narrow Harris district and a very narrow win for the Democrat against Michelle Steele last year. I think it's slightly more Democratic now, but it is still very much. I think that it is said to be safe Democratic, but I've looked into more data. And, there's no clear, I haven't seen anything from Dave Wasserman or something, but I've seen other analysts look at it, and I'm not sure where they're getting their numbers from, but I did hear that this was Harris +4 or anything, or something like that, so I'm going to give this I'm going to put this as lean D for right now. George Whiteside's district did get a lot bluer. I think it got like 10% bluer. Harris would have won it by 10% more than the current boundaries. So, I mean, Mike Garcia was already, deciding not to run again, but that's going to be a problem. Then David Valadao, see, this does have the partisan lean here is favoring the Democrats, but I do believe this was a seat that went from like Biden plus 13 in 2020 to like Trump plus 6 in 2024. I think it's a little bit more of a narrow Trump seat from the data that I have so far gone over, but again, I think that people are still combing through all the data, so I haven't seen anything from like from Dave Wasserman from the Cook Political Report or anything to like confirm necessarily the exact district margins. But Valadao, it's a narrow Trump seat from what I understand, and he's not overperforming at the levels that he used to, but this district is getting redder. It is right trending, very similar to California's 13th, although this seat I do think Adam Gray is a very strong incumbent, and Valadao, Democrats have kind of dropped the ball there. I think Rudy Salas is running a third time, but I do think Democrats are coalescing around someone else, but we'll have to wait and see how that race turns out. Nevada, I'm going to give these two likely seats to the Democrats, and then this Trump seat, or the seat that went to Trump very narrowly in 2024. This is Susie Lee's district. She won by around 2, I want to say. What did she win by? I want to say that 3%. Yeah, she did okay. But she did she was one of the few, she was the only Democrat in the House delegation who won by less than she did in 2022. Nevada is right trending. This is very much Clark County. Joe Lombardo could definitely boost whoever the Republicans nominate here. We'll have to see. Arizona, I'm going to go over here. Jonathan Nez, I believe, is running against Eli Crane again. He did pretty well, all things considered. I think Trump actually may have won this by a safe margin, but Crane only did like a couple points better than he did in 2022. So I think this district, especially if like with rural turnout down, this could even be a lean seat potentially. Especially if Nez, who is I think like the former president of the Navajo Nation, does excite Native American turnout. So that could be an interesting seat to watch in a blue wave year. Although I don't, I don't necessarily think 2026 is going to be a blue wave year, at least not yet. You'll see how this prediction turns out at the end. David Schweikert has been pretty resilient against Democratic candidates. The party had a pretty, divided primary last year, which I think really did hurt their odds against Schweikert because they did really well here in 2022. They almost upset him. But Trump won this district. Trump did really well in Arizona. I do believe Ruben Gallego won this seat. He also won Juan Ciscomani's seat. But Schweikert did win re-election by about 4 points. I do think that this is a seat that is going to stay Republican for the time being. He's been resilient. He's won in midterms before, but this is a left-trending district long-term. And I think, Democrats could, he could be caught sleeping by the Democrats, but I think right now his odds going into 2026 look a lot better than they did in 2024. Juan Scamani, this one is going to be interesting, especially with the Medicaid cuts. This is a very Medicaid. There are a lot of Medicaid, patients or people enrolled in Medicaid on this district. Scamani's vote to pass the big beautiful bill, which cuts Medicaid spending, is definitely going to be a big, issue here. This could very well be a seat the Democrats pick up, but I don't think they necessarily need it to win the majority. New Mexico's second. This seat voted for Trump I think it went from being like Biden plus 6 to Trump plus 1 or 2. But Gabe Vasquez has done very well here. He's defeated Yvette Herrell, who he defeated her in 2022. Then he won a rematch against her in 2024 by roughly 5 more points. I think that right now Herrell does not look like she wants to run again. So I think that this seat honestly could be likely Democratic if the environment gets better for the party. But for right now, I'm going to put it in lean D. Colorado, Lauren Boebert's former seat. I think this is Jeff Hurd's seat. I don't think Adam Frisch is running against him to keep it as likely. Then Lauren Boebert's seat. She did pretty badly in 2024 compared to Trump. She really underperformed. I think in 2026, her margin is going to be less than stellar. She's going to fall behind other Republican candidates here in Colorado in the Senate race and in the governor's race. the Colorado's 8th. This was one of the few seats this was one of the seats that helped Republicans maintain their majority. They defeated Gabe Evans defeated Yadiro Caraveo last year. Democrats do have a new. I think Caraveo is running again, but there is another candidate, Manny Rutinel, who has. I think he's got like the Congressional Hispanic Caucus's endorsement. And I think that personally he's the favorite right now in the primary, but this is a seat that I think, this is a very narrow Trump seat. It voted for Biden by like 5, so it does swing and back and forth with the country. I think right now I will give it to Rutinel or whoever the Democratic nominee is, but that primary fight, if it gets ugly, could definitely boost Evans' chances. But this is another very heavy. This seat has a lot of people enrolled on Medicaid. I think that that's a common theme that you're going to see here, is Republicans are going to have to really defend that decision, because it is going to impact a lot of people. Then going to, where should we go? I guess we'll deal with Missouri. The only reason that so here's the thing. I guess I'll get this out of the way. I think there's a lot of talk about Missouri and Indiana redistricting. Right now I'm more inclined to say that Indiana is going to redistrict than Missouri. I think that there's a reality in which both do it, but I think Indiana right now is definitely. I think Trump invited the state Republicans to the White House, so he's really putting the pressure on them in a very similar vein to how he put pressure on Texas. But Missouri right now is kind of taking a backseat. I honestly don't think that we're going to see an all-out redistricting war. I mean, we're definitely going to see a couple of states tear up their maps. Ohio's another state that's going to redistrict. We'll get to that in a minute. But Missouri, I think it definitely could happen. It's definitely one of the more likely ones. But I honestly think that at the end of the day, logistics run into the logistics of tearing up so many maps to counteract Democrats. In California. Because let's face it, they don't have a lot of opportunities elsewhere. We'll see what they do. But if the Republicans in the state decide to redraw the maps, they're very likely to target Emanuel Cleaver here in the 5th district, which is contains most of Kansas City. So that could definitely be a seat that Republicans decide to take care of, or to redraw in their favor. We'll go down to Texas now that we're talking about it. Oh, and Indiana. I think Frank Mervyn would lose. I mean, but we all know that Frank Mervyn's in this seat. I kind of addressed why that is. So I don't know exactly how they draw this map, but I do think that that is more of a priority for the national GOP, is to redistrict in Indiana than in Missouri. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I could very much see a reality in which both do it. Going on to Texas, it's interesting. So I left a couple of these seats. There's this one seat in Houston and one in Dallas that are going to be become safe Republican, and so that's going to force Democrats, 2 Democrat on Democrat primaries here, and then this one down here, the 35th district, which is currently safe blue, is going to, I think, be transformed to like Trump plus 10 or something, but I think it's the only new seat that is majority minority in the Texas House. They're in the that's created by the New Lines, at least among the Republican ones. Although I don't know, that could very much be true for these two, the seats for Cuellar and Gonzalez. But I think right now this is the seat that is definitely more vulnerable than the seats in Dallas and Houston, that are getting drawn out. But I think Republicans. Democrats haven't had a lot of success in Texas since 2018, and I don't think that's necessarily something that, they're going to start seeing anytime soon. I think that they're going to do okay there. I think that they have a floor. I think that 2024 was the floor for now, but we'll see what happens with these Hispanic trends in the Rio Grande Valley. And speaking of that, I do think if you look at the new district boundaries, which again, this is still the old map that we're looking at because none of these maps have been approved yet, but Texas is looking to approve their new maps today, or not today, but I think this week. Henry Cuellar, despite this being like a Trump plus 10 district, it does incorporate more of San Antonio, and he would have won by like 8 points instead of 5 points under this map. And so I think that's an interesting thing to think about, but Cuellar also is fighting for his innocence or fighting for his freedom in court right now. I do believe that the for bribery charges, I do believe that the trial got pushed to later spring of next year. It was supposed to start in fall. So if Democrats are locked in with him, that this could easily become a more treacherous seat for them. But again, these allegations were hanging over Cuellar in 2024, and he was still able to win. So we'll have to see what happens. But this seat could definitely be more appear more ripe as a Republican. It appears a more ripe Republican pickup. But for right now, I'm going to give it to Cuellar. Especially if he resigns as a result of a potential conviction, that would be really bad news for Democrats. Then I think that the seat would, by default, move to being a Republican pickup. For the 34th district, I could definitely see Vicente Gonzalez hanging on here. This is an ever Trump plus 10 seat, but I do believe this was a narrow Trump seat. I think this was like Trump plus 7, but Gonzalez won by roughly 3 points against Mayra Flores, which is less than I expected. Mayra Flores is now running against Cuellar in the 28th, and I don't think that there's as strong of a candidate right now. But we could very well see that change after Texas approves these maps and legislatures and candidates start jockeying for these positions. And so in the 34th, I think right now Gonzalez is a narrow underdog, but he very much is a moderate Democrat. He's one of the most moderate in the House, along with Cuellar, although I would say he's a little bit more to the left than Cuellar is. So I think right now he could very much pull it off. The Hispanic trends towards Republicans in 2024, and since Donald Trump came onto the political scene, have very much been strongest when Trump is on the ballot. And I think that in 2022, Democrats did really, really well in this region, in hindsight, compared to what they pulled off in 2024. And so I think in 2026, depending on what happens, the Rio Grande Valley, even if the rest of Texas is still pretty red, Greg Abbott pretty much really underperformed here compared to Trump. Or I don't know if I would say he underperformed, but he definitely didn't do as well as he could have. In this, Beto O'Rourke did pretty well in these districts in 2022. Cuellar and Gonzalez did okay. So I think right now we'll see what happens with Gonzalez, but I definitely don't think... I think, worst case scenario, Democrats hold on to 3 of the redrawn seats, but I think the most realistic scenario would be right now is them losing 4 of these seats and then holding on to 1, but they could definitely hold on to Gonzalez's seat. I could even see flipping these seats around, depending on what happens with Cuellar and Gonzalez's status. Going over to Florida, though, I'm spending way too much time yapping. I think Ron DeSantis is looking to rip up these maps, even though he just got a major victory in the courts. From this Florida Supreme Court, which upheld this map, which drew out a majority black district here which stretched from Jacksonville all the way to the panhandle of the state. And so I think that right now Florida's in terms of the state's most likely to redistrict, I would say Missouri is more likely than Florida right now, but DeSantis definitely could, he's definitely been one of the more willing governors of a red state that are of red states that are being targeted for redistricting. In terms of he's a lot more eager to redistrict than some of the others, like Mike Braun in Indiana. I think Mike Keogh in Missouri has been pretty willing, but DeSantis definitely could be. I think DeSantis definitely has has expressed a lot of interest in doing it. But I think for right now, the only competitive seat here, if the map holds, is Jared Moskowitz's seat here in the 23rd, and that's been a pretty solidly... this is a seat that I think DeSantis won in 2022, but Val Demings barely won it against Marco Rubio in the Senate race. And I think Democrats they've held up here. They've kind of, Moskowitz has pretty much has won by 5 points twice here. I don't remember exactly how Debbie Murkowski-Powell did here in the Senate race, but I do think that she might have done a little bit better. But either way, I think Moskowitz is going to be fine unless they try and draw him out, which is very possible. North Carolina, I'm going to give this seat to Don Davis. I think black turnout here is going to drop, which could very much mean doom for Davis, but I think the Democrats, it's really good that I think Roy Cooper being in the race definitely. If he had not gotten into the Senate race, Don Davis I think would have, and that would have really put the seat in danger. This is a narrow Trump seat. It's very right trending. Used to be solid Democratic, and so I think Republican turnout here could also kind of plummet, because it's a midterm year or rural turnout. But we'll have to see how this one turns out. This could also be a sleeper flip for the Republicans, or I don't even know if it's necessarily a sleeper flip. I mean, it's one of the 13 districts where a House Democrat won in 24 while Trump won it on the presidential level. So it's definitely not a sleeper, but I think it's one of the less likely of that group. Suhas Subramaniam in Virginia. I think he had a pretty underwhelming performance in 2024. I don't think that I think that generally on Virginia is a lot more Republican down ballot in terms of the Loudoun, at least Loudoun County is. I wouldn't apply that as a blanket statement to Virginia that it's more Republican down ballot. Rob Whitman, this seat I think went to Trump by 4 or 5. I want to say this is a seat that's underrated for how competitive it is, but Rob Whitman really does do a very good job of holding on to this seat. I think in a Democratic wave year, though, he could find himself in a little bit of trouble, but I would be very surprised if he lost, or even, it really came close to losing. But I could see this, I could potentially see this in a really good, like in a 2018 level environment, being like a lean red seat. Eugene Vindman in the 7th, I think he's going to be okay. This is a Harris plus free seat. He won by a similar amount. We'll have to see how Abigail Spanberger does here in the 2025 in the governor's election this November, but I do think that she's going to do pretty well, and we'll actually have a video out on the governor's mansion, the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey very soon. I've been kind of procrastinating making a video about that, but yeah, I think Vindman's going to be okay here. In terms of Jen Kiggans, I do think she's going to lose. I think it depends on who Democrats get to run in this race. I think in 2024 they really neglected this seat. I mean, Elaine Luria lost in 22, and I think that they just kind of really were looking at New York and California. We're not paying attention to this seat, which is very much a bellwether in most of the time. And so I think Virginia's second. I think Aaron Rouse, who ran for lieutenant governor, he is a state senator from this district. He did really well here in the lieutenant gubernatorial primary. I think that he could very much, if he runs, he would be the front runner. But you could also see Ralph Northam's wife running, Pamela Northam, the former First Lady. You could also see Michael Fegans, who I don't know as much about. But overall, I think Democrats have better options here than they did in 2024. Going back to the Midwest, though, we kind of forgot about this. Nebraska's second, Don Bacon's retiring here. John Kavanaugh, who was the son of the former Democratic representative from this seat, is running. Republicans, though, they have some good options here. And there has been, I think, a little bit of chatter about Nebraska even redistricting, because this is a seat that Kamala Harris won. This is one of free Republican seats the House Republicans won in 24 that Kamala Harris carried. The other two are in Brian Fitzpatrick in Pennsylvania and Mike Lawler in New York. But Bacon has decided to retire, and I think that that's a fatal blow for Republicans here. So, and I don't think, honestly, that they're going to redistrict it. I think that voters really like... Nebraska is one of 2 states where they split their electoral votes by congressional district, and there was talk about removing that last year ahead of 2024, and it didn't happen. I don't think it's going to happen this time. I do think in Iowa's 3rd that Zach Nunn will win. He was going to run for governor, or at least he seemed to want to, but Trump kind of said, no, you got to stay in this district. Democrats did... I was wrong about this district. I think this was one of the ones. I was actually more bullish on the Democrat here in Nunn's district than I was on Christina Bohannon. I can't say that name. In Iowa's 1st, but it turned out that the opposite was true. Mariannette Miller Meeks, I think, is really, really... this is a Trump plus 8 seat, and she barely won. And this is, she had defeated the same Democrat by 7 points 2 years prior. And, that was when there was less rural turnout, where Iowa was, where most of these seats, Iowa's 2nd with Ashley Hinson and Iowa's 3rd here were more favorable to Democrats, but she has had some pretty close races. I mean, you look at 2020, she won by like 6 votes. So I think that this is a seat that if Democrats want to win back the House majority, they really are going to have to pick up. Angie Craig in Minnesota's second district, I think that this is a seat that could very much become more competitive, but Democrats have a good bench here. Craig is running for Senate, but she won by like 14 points in 2024. Like this was one of the best results I think for House Democrats across the nation. She was pretty much considered, a shoe-in for re-election. But Harris won this seat by like only a point, maybe more than Biden did. I mean, I think Biden won it by like 5, she won it by 6, but Craig just had tremendous margins in this seat, and I think her Republican opponent is running again, Joe Terab, and so I think Democrats, they do have like a somewhat competitive primary here, and this could possibly get a little competitive. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I put this as a likely seat in a couple of weeks or in a couple months. Wisconsin, this is a seat that I've gone back and forth on. This is a seat where Democrats really outperform down ballot. Derek Van Orden is a very bad incumbent, and Rebecca Cook, who ran against him in 24, did really, really well. I don't remember. Did I have her winning in this seat, or did I have Van Orden winning? I cannot remember, but it was one of the closest districts. This was one where I was very much on the side of... I think I narrowly picked Van Orden in this district. I think I would remember if I got this district wrong. I remember most of the other ones. I'm going to give it to Van Orden right now. I think Wisconsin... The outlook here... Well, Democrats have an open governor's race, so they aren't going to have maybe as great of statewide, prospects or statewide election prospects, and that could definitely impact Cook here. But I could very much see this district in a couple of months shifting towards the Democrats, especially if they build up their nationwide lead, which is probably going to happen in at least the next couple of months. As we approach the 1 year, anniversary of the 2024 election. But we will, we'll see if that holds. But I think that I would not be surprised if the next House prediction I put out, I have Van Orden losing. He's not a good incumbent. He has, a lot of, notable moments on Capitol Hill that have really embarrassed some of his colleagues. And I think Rebecca Cook, she's got a lot of, broad support. She's white, she's really appeals to the white working class people here, while also being, getting endorsements from people like Bernie Sanders. I mean, I think she's the best candidate, really, Democrats could put up in this district that are not named Ron Kind. So going to Michigan, I would say Hillary Schulten, Kristen McDonald-Rivette are very much looking relatively safe. I think McDonald-Rivette, she's a really good candidate. She won like a Trump plus 2 district by 6 in 2024. I could see it dropping maybe to a lean margin, but for right now, I'm going to give her a likely margin. Bill Huizenga here, in the fourth, he was thinking about running for Senate, decided not to at the behest of Donald Trump, because Mike Rogers, who ran for Senate last year, is running again, and he got Trump's endorsement. So Huizenga may or may not... There's been some talk about him retiring. If he does, this could definitely... I don't remember. Is this a Trump? I think this is like a Trump plus 5 seat or something like that. It's not as Republican as you may think. But Huizenga has held it for roughly 15 years. I could very much see him retiring. He lost out on a committee post last year, and if he does, that could definitely make this seat competitive in a Democratic-leaning year. If he does decide to run, I think it'll still be relatively, it'll still be within reach for Democrats, but it would be more of a stretch, and I think I expect him to run right now. I'm actually going to be a bit bullish on Republicans in the 7th district here. I do think Tom Barrett is going to win, and that's an unpopular opinion right now. I think the Democrats have a much better candidate. I think they have like the former ambassador to Ukraine running against Barrett, and for what it's worth, Barrett did lose to Lisa Slotkin in 2022 by 5 points, but that was also in a very Democratic wave year in Michigan, roughly not nationwide, but in Michigan it was definitely a Democratic wave. And I think he had a really bad opponent in 2024, and that definitely helped him get over the finish line. But he also overperformed Trump by around 3 points. I think Trump won the seat by like 1 against Harris. He won it by 4 against Curtis Hurdle. So I think that he is definitely a strong candidate. I could definitely see the seat. You know, this is a seat the Democrats really should be winning if they want, to win a healthy House majority or potentially a House majority at all. So them losing this is not good, but I think right now they're looking at pretty bleak 2026 in Michigan. I don't think that they're necessarily going to lose the governor's mansion or the Senate race, but they have both open races, and in the governor's race they have a really good candidate in Jocelyn Benson, but they have to deal with the independent mayor of Detroit, Mike Dugan, and then in the Senate race they have a crowded primary on the Democratic side because Gary Peters decided not to run, while the Republicans have coalesced around Rogers. So I think right now I'm going to give it to Barrett. Could change. Ohio, this is another state that's going to have to redistrict. Excuse me, I don't know what happened to my voice there. But yeah, this is another state where mid-decade redistricting is mandatory. It's not a partisan effort. This is actually, I think, the only state where a court has ordered, hey, you guys actually have to redraw. And so we'll see. I think Democrats are going to be targeted in this process. Marcy Copter, she's in a Trump seat. She's been in Congress forever. She did really well here in 2024, all things considered. I think Trump won the seat by like 6, and she won it. I mean, it was a very close victory. I mean, you look at the shift. You look at what she did in 2022 against J.R. Majewski, who was an awful candidate. But she barely won against Derek Murrin in 24. But she still, overperformed by a decent amount. And so she's still there, but I think that she's going to get drawn out. Amelia Sykes is probably going to get drawn out too in the 13th. But we'll have to see, because Ohio, I don't think that they're necessarily guaranteed to draw a Republican gerrymander, because the state constitution does say that redistricting maps do have to pass with bipartisan support, or else they will have to be redrawn down the line, and that's what happened in 2022. That's why we're in this situation right now. So we'll see. We'll see what what Republicans come up with. Something could also be struck down under the Voting Rights Act, although we'll have to see what the Supreme Court does with that. Anyways, going to Pennsylvania, Chris Delugio, I mean, he's been this is like a Harris plus 6 seat. He's doing fine. He has overperformed my expectations both times. I'm not worried about him. I think, and especially if with Josh Shapiro on the ballot, that's going to give Democrats a big boost in some of these seats. I think that Delugio is going to be fine. Brian Fitzpatrick, I think he's going to be okay. He is going to face, I've heard that Democrats are recruiting a local official who is more popular. I think he might be like the Bucks County Commissioner or something to run for this seat, and he would definitely pose more of a threat to Fitzpatrick than he's seen in the last couple of cycles. But as for right now, he is, I think, in a good position. Scott Perry is going down, I think. I think this is a seat the Democrats absolutely have to win if they want the House majority back. And Janelle Stelson, she did really well in 2024. I think this was one of the seats where I was very accurate in terms of my prediction. This is a Trump plus 5 seat. Perry has traditionally overperformed, Republicans at the top of the ticket. But he has, I think, really come under some legal trouble. He is a lot less popular in this district. This is a left-trending district long term. And in 2026, I think with Republican turnout down, with Josh Shapiro likely winning this district in the governor's race, I think Perry's going down. I think that this is the year where Democrats finally get him. They've been trying to get him for, roughly 10 years. I think this is the time when they are going to get their wish. Now, these 2 seats in Northeast Pennsylvania, I'm going to split them. Rob Bresnahan, this is another seat with a lot of Medicaid enrollees, and I think Democrats, Matt Cartwright's not running here, so I think that really hurts them, but this is a seat where Bresnahan really did do a lot worse than Trump. I think this seat voted, Harris lost the seat by like 9 points at the top of the ticket, and Cartwright was able to outperform her by roughly 8. So Bresnahan, he's not the most experienced candidate. I think he could definitely catch himself, on the run. He could definitely be defeated in a year where Democrats are doing pretty well in Pennsylvania. But again, I don't think Shapiro's necessarily going to have the same wave that he did in 26. I don't think Republicans are going to nominate Doug Mastriano again. They look like they're going to nominate the state treasurer, which is better. But I don't think she's still not the best. She's probably the best candidate, but she's not going to be. I would be hard pressed to see anyone beating Shapiro. And then Ryan McKenzie here in the 7th. This was a big surprise after Susan Wild pulled off an upset in 2022. She lost this race. This was a race that was, I think, honestly considered more blue, more in her favor than Cartwright's was in his own favor. And McKenzie won it. Trump won it by, I think, roughly the same amount. I'm going to give it to the Democrats here. This is another seat where they absolutely have to hold on, or they have to flip it back if they want the House majority, and I think they're going to do it. New Jersey, we have a pair of competitive districts here. I think Democrats' outlook in New Jersey is pretty bleak. Honestly, it's been a state that's been trending right for the last 5 years, and Nellie Poe, this is a seat that really should not have been competitive. I can only imagine what would have happened if Bill Pascrell had still been on the ballot. He had won by 11 points in 2024. This was a seat that had voted for Biden by 19, and it voted for Trump by 1 point in 24. So this is a seat that really, really was an example of New Jersey just zooming to the right. And I think Poe, she's going to win. I would be surprised if she doesn't. But it's definitely possible she loses. But I think Democrats are going to have to look at this seat. This is an example of their problem with Arab voters, with Hispanic voters. This whole district, this whole district this whole part of northern Jersey has really shifted to the right in the last couple of years. Tom Keene, I think, is going to be hard for Democrats to knock off unless they get Tom Malinowski to run for this seat. And honestly, if Mikey Sherrill wins the governor's race, she's going to have to resign her seat here in the 11th. And currently, I do believe the Democrats are favored in New Jersey, despite all of their hardship in this state. But Malinowski has said he would be interested in running for this seat, and this would be a more permanent. This would be a safer deal for him than running against Keene. I also have heard Democrats are thinking about tearing up the maps in New Jersey, but honestly, I don't think they're going to do it. I don't. What are they going to do? They're probably, this is a map where they already compared to the one in the 2010s, they really did lock up a lot of their incumbents here, and they sacrificed Malinowski's district, which is now Keene's, but still, they did a pretty good job, all things considered. Going up to New York here, there's been talk about them redrawing too, but the earliest that they could do it, they would have to put a ballot. I think Kathy Hochul and state Democrats would have to put a ballot initiative on the ballot in November next year, which would ask voters if they wanted to redraw maps. So that means that the earliest that new maps could come into effect would be 2028. And honestly, I could see it. I could see Kathy Hochul and the Democrats doing it, but they already tried once with gerrymandering New York. I don't think they'd quite go to the extent that they were going to pre-2022, but right now these maps honestly serve them pretty well. They had a really bad 2022 in New York. We'll have to see how Hochul performs this year, because she really was a drag on Democrats 4 years ago, but I think honestly, for the time being, Democrats are probably going to do okay here in New York. I think John Mannion, Pat Ryan, they're looking at likely seats. Michael Alder, I still think, is going to evade them. I think even if they had... This is a seat that's really... if Lawler had run for governor, it would have been a lot easier for Democrats to pick this one up. But honestly, I think this is a seat that barely voted for Harris. It is generally right trending. And I think Lawler running in this district, I think Democrats really have... they basically got back to their pre-2022 numbers here in New York in last year's election. Josh Riley, this seat could definitely become more competitive. I think Hochul's race... The New York's House elections are going to look better for Republicans a year down the line than they do now, because I am convinced that Hochul's going to have a pretty tough re-election, and that could definitely impact Democrats' chances of winning the House here. But we'll see what happens. I could definitely see Tom Suozzi or Josh Riley or even Laura Gillen losing re-election. Mannion or Ryan, I think it's harder for me to see. If one was to, if one was to lose, it would be Mannion in Brandon Williams' former district near Syracuse. So now we have these final three seats. I'm going to give Maggie Goodlander the victory. I'm going to give, actually, this is an open seat. This is Chris Pappas' seat. He's running for Senate, so this would be, I guess, Maura Sullivan. She's probably going to run for this seat and be the Democratic nominee. I could definitely see this race being likely D. New Hampshire's been pretty good for Democrats federally. They're looking pretty good in the Senate race this year, or next year. I think that Chris Pappas really has cleared the field. Scott Brown's not the best candidate for the Republicans, and New Hampshire's a state that's known for ticket splitting. So Kelly Ayotte, she was, I think that she really was conscious of the fact that New Hampshire voters federally really like, to vote for Democrats, but they much prefer Republicans like her, locally. And so she decided, after calls to redistrict, that she wouldn't allow it. She would not sign a map that would create one Republican district and one safe Democratic district. And so, as a result, Democrats live to fight another day in New Hampshire. So, going up to Maine, this is the seat that decides it all. Jared Golden versus Paul LePage, the former governor of Maine. Golden has been a fighter, but he really did underperform last year in 2024 against this Republican. I think he was like a race car driver or something, or he might have been a state senator. What was his deal? He was a former NASCAR driver, but he was a state representative. He had Donald Trump's endorsement. It was, honestly, there were signs that this seat was going to be really close. I was right about it, unlike in 2022, so, there's that. And also Trump's victory in the 2nd district. I think he did worse than he did in 2024 in terms of the second, versus 2016 in terms of his margin here. But either way, I do think Golden is favored. Paul LePage, he won this district in his governor's race in 2022 against his run against Janet Mills. We'll have to see. Susan Collins, I think, the Maine's another state that loves to take its splits, so Susan Collins likely winning this, if she's going to have to win this seat if she wants to win re-election. More than that, she'll have to do well in the 1st district too, but Susan Collins' assumed victory here, if she decides to run for re-election, will help LePage, but I don't think that it's necessarily going... I think Golden right now, for the time being, does seem to be okay. His shifting position on gun control could definitely hurt him, and I think that definitely did hurt him in 2024, but Trump, rural turnout's going to be down. This is a very rural district, to be fair. It's like so rural that, there's barely anyone who lives, north of, around here, because of all this forest land, all of the land that's forested. But I do think Maine's second right now goes to the Democrats. As a result, Democrats barely win the House majority. I really think that they've got to... I think the House really is a toss-up right now. And depending on how mid-decade redistricting goes, depending on how these seats go and how the national environment ebbs and flows, I could very much see Republicans winning or holding on to the House. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think this is going to be my final prediction. Despite how polarized of a country we are right now, I don't think we're going to see a one-seat House majority for either party through, in terms of the seats won in November, through, depending on vacancies in the next Congress, absolutely Democrats could, their majority could slim down to, a one-seat margin. But I don't think that's something that voters are going to do. They've been very clear that they like the 220, I think it's really funny, the whole 220, how Democrats won in 2020 with 222 seats and the Republicans flipped the House with the exact same amount, and then in 2024, they barely, they got exactly 220. So there's, those are very slim majorities, and I think the Democrats really do need, if they want a blue wave, they're really going to have to get their stuff together, because they need to, if they want to put a check on Donald Trump and really have momentum going into 2028, they really do have to win the House. They don't necessarily have to win the Senate. If they want to win Senate control in 2028, they're going to have to do pretty well this year, or this coming year. But and they have done pretty well in terms of candidate recruitment in that regard. But the House is definitely the prize for them. That's really what they should be looking at. And they are looking at it. And I think right now the generic ballot polling looks good for them. They can definitely win if they have a 4% lead in the generic ballot. And again, I don't think necessarily just because they have a very similar lead nationwide to 2024 that means they're going to underperform by the same amount, because Trump being on the ballot, definitely makes all that wonky. But they really do have to get star candidates in these races, and I think that's one of the reasons why Republicans rebounded from 2022. You really can't judge a party's chances at winning the presidency solely based off their midterms, and I think to an extent that's what I did in terms of when I look back at what I did wrong in 2024. It was kind of hard to see, but in 2022 there were signs the Democrats were not, their support wasn't ironclad. And I don't necessarily think that I based my predictions off of 2024 is obviously going to be a better year than 2022. That wasn't my complete philosophy, but it definitely was a part of it. And so I think with this prediction, I'm trying to be more conservative and kind of say this election could be a lot more like the Democrats' 2022 in terms of an underperforming midterm performance. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if this map happens, that they necessarily are locked out of White House control in 2028, because as we saw, Republicans got it together in those last 2 years of Biden's administration. They found good candidates. They got behind Trump, and they won. They won an ever trifecta, and I think a very similar thing could happen in 2028, even if 2026 doesn't go super well for the Democrats. But I do think, it would be really demoralizing for them if they lost the House majority. I think, there's a difference between winning a slim majority and not winning it at all. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, I never very long House video, but I guess I'm not super upset about that, because these videos, all election YouTubers take forever on these districts. So thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, all that jazz. Share this with someone who you think would enjoy it. Let me know who you think's gonna, how all these districts are gonna vote, and which party do you think is gonna be in power after 2026? Do you agree with my predictions in Iowa or Ohio or Pennsylvania or even Arizona? Let me know. I'd really love to hear all your thoughts, and I'll be back, probably in a couple months with my next House prediction. But I will be coming out with more videos later this week on the governor's races and the Senate races for this year and next year, respectively. So thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Or I'll see. I forgot my my final saying or whatever. It's been so long since I made a video. I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.